nestled right in the center. Overhead appears to be a giant wagon wheel type structure. A building, if you will, a central hub with many spokes leading to the outer wall. This building was one of the first of its kind to ever be built in the United States, and it is also known as Eastern State Penn. Now, Eastern State Penn housed many criminals throughout the years. Sometimes, like many prisons in the United States, became very overcrowded. But one of the most notable and famous inmates of its time was Al Capone. Now, Al Capone, you would suspect, being one of the top gangsters, would be placed in a situation that was extremely unlike his norm and very uncomfortable. Eastern State Penitentiary opened in 1829 with the mission statement, "Rehabilitation through solitude with labor." After being arrested for theft on October 25th, Charles Williams became prisoner number 1 when he was sentenced to 2 years. In 1831, Eastern State Penn underwent a few changes. They welcomed their first female prisoner, and cell block number 3 was completed. This was the last of the single-story cell blocks, and construction began on number 4, 5, 6, and 7, designed as 2-story structures. This would accommodate the increase of prisoners, and cell block number 7 was completed in 1835. The property had 11 acres, 450 centrally heated cells. Prisons around the world copied the style of the spoke and wheel. The cost? Almost $780,000. And this was one of the most expensive buildings in the United States at the time. In 1842, Charles Dickens made a visit to the United States, and it was said that he made a point to visit Niagara Falls and Eastern State Penn. In 1858, Eastern State received over 10,000 tourists in 1 year, all just coming to see what this modern marvel was all about. 1877 saw 4 new cell blocks added, but these were without the attached exercise yard. This was filling in the open spaces between already existing structures. 1911 saw cell block 12 completed. This structure consisted of 3 levels with 40 cells on each floor. And in 1926, cell block 14 was completed as the structure's second, third-story building. Originally, the prison had planned to only hold 250 inmates. Now, with this, it holds approximately 1,700. In 1923, Eastern State Penn said goodbye to the final female prisoner, Frida Frost, when she was transferred to a different institution. During its time of operation, there were more than 100 escapes from Eastern State Penitentiary, dating as early back as 1832, when William Hamilton, the warden's waiter, escaped by lowering himself from the roof, was captured again, but repeated the process in 1837. In 1923, Leo Callahan, with 5 other accomplices, held up a group of guards and scaled the east wall. The others were caught. Leo is considered still at large. Famous bank robber Slick Willie Sutton spent 11 years incarcerated at Eastern State, but in 1945 he, with about 10 others, decided to go through a prisoner-dug tunnel that dropped almost 100 feet underground, to only be captured minutes later when they came out on the other side. In 1961, a prisoner tricked a guard into opening the cell of another prisoner, and when he did so, the two attacked the guard and began the largest riot in Eastern State Penitentiary's history. It was over in a few hours, but this began the talks of the punishment that was taking place and possibly closing the prison. In 1970, Eastern State Penitentiary officially closed. A few months later, briefly opened until 1971, only to house prisoners following a riot at the county prison. The property sat abandoned until the mid to late 1980s, being subject to vandalism in the harsh Philadelphia winters. In 1991, a Halloween fundraiser was put together with a few hundred people in attendance, and since then has become one of the most popular parts of Eastern State. 1994 saw the start of the first daytime tours, and in 2003 it was added as an audio tour hosted and voiced by none other than Steve Buscemi. The building also became a backdrop for the 1996 movie starring Bruce Willis called 12 Monkeys. With over 1,400 prisoner deaths taking place on the property, Cell Block 3 being the hospital, Cell Block 4 being death row, a whole area for solitary confinement. The haunting stories of Eastern State Penn include things such as disembodied voices, shadows, footsteps, and just feelings of dread. But some of the most haunting tales of Eastern State Penitentiary come from the prison's most infamous guest, or resident, if you will. From 1929 to 1930, Eastern State Penn was the home to none other than Al Capone. Capone's cell was centrally located in a prime spot of the prison, fully decked out with lavish rugs, a lamp for lighting, a desk, and even a radio. Despite the fact that Al Capone was living more so in a resort-style setting than the prison itself, he was tormented in other ways, said to hear disembodied voices, and specifically claiming that the ghost of James Clark, a St. Valentine's Day massacre victim, was haunting Al Capone and would not leave him alone for the things he had done. Guards and fellow inmates even reported hearing Al Capone screaming at night, yelling and pleading for Jimmy to please stop and leave him alone. Al went as far as to hire a medium to try and put an end to this, and still believed that Jimmy followed him all the way even to Alcatraz. Although it's said Capone didn't believe that it was just Jimmy that he was encountering, the question still remains: was Al Capone experiencing Eastern State Penitentiary being haunted? Or was it just him? I'd been to Eastern State Penn twice. The first time, we had gone just for a day tour, It was a deal to where we had gone to Hershey and we figured we'd take the road trip for the day, hit over to Philadelphia, maybe get a cheesesteak, and check out this massive structure in the middle of the city. Now, once you get inside these huge walls, you see how the layout is with the wagon spokes. And you go in and out, and when you find yourself in the very center, in the main hub, you literally can see down every corridor. You can see down every walkway, and you can see why it was built that way. During that trip, there were a lot of pieces that we couldn't really, pieces of the prison, the penitentiary, that we couldn't go into. They didn't allow us into certain areas, like at the time, the infirmary, the hospital wing. There were a couple others because it was so dilapidated. It was falling down. It was in a state of ruin. And it definitely had that feel, that creepy vibe. Like, you just know if there's going to be a haunted place, this has got to be it, right? On that tour, we walked around, we checked out all kinds of things. We looked at the baseball diamond, we looked in the little areas where the inmates would have their recreation time, checked out all the cells, went over, had to go check out Al Capone's cell, the most famous cell in the prison. The stories of the punishments and the solitary confinement that drove people absolutely insane, there's so many of them that there's just got to be something there. We continued through the tour, taking pictures, checking things out. We did have a voice recorder with us that we tried out in a couple areas while we were by ourselves, and not much luck as far as that goes. It is an old structure, and you're always going to hear things falling, water dripping somewhere, things of that nature, but we weren't hearing voices. We weren't having anything happen. Again, this was just a day tour, random day we decided to stop in and visit this prison. We made a point to check out, even though we couldn't go into the infirmary ward, we had talked to the docents that were there. They explained to us that, they were working to try to rehab that area to open it again at some point, like they had just recently done with the synagogue for the Jewish temple. However, this was an area that hadn't been hit yet, hadn't been cleaned up or touched yet, and you could see so from the pictures. It was definitely in a state of disrepair. The thing with it was that we were told that absolutely no one was allowed to go anywhere near it. There would be nobody around it. And that's just what it was. I had even asked if we came and booked one of their ghost hunts, if we would get any closer access at that point in time. And we were told, as of then, no. So we took pictures, and, we just took pictures, kept looking around, listened to the tour. When we were done, we left. We went back to the hotel to enjoy the rest of our vacation. And as I was sifting through the pictures, I found something a little odd. You see, there's this picture of the infirmary wing, and you could see the state of trouble that it's in. And like they told us, there's no way there is any access. Nobody would be in there. No one would be anywhere around there. It's just not accessible to the public. And there'd be no reason for staff to be there at all. We did not see this when we were there live in person. We didn't notice it. It was just an empty corridor leading to the hospital wing. So this was a bit unexplained, to say the least. After having what we're considering a floating head pop up in a picture from this prison during a day tour, just like I said, a random walking through during the day tour, to have something like that happen, it definitely intrigued me. It made me want to know more, and it made me want to have the ability to investigate it, to have it on lockdown, if you will, to where we know who is on the premises, and if there is anyone else on the premises, where they're at all times. To do this, we booked a ghost hunt for one night there during the summer. The ghost hunt was interesting. You definitely, if you think the building and the structure and the property is creepy and has that almost haunty vibe during the daytime, you can only imagine what it's like at night. Minimal lighting, you're looking down and all you can see, the moon shining through the little holes in the ceiling of the cells, and that's the light you get other than flashlights. It's definitely on the scary factor, if not haunted. The whole point of the investigation was just that, to see if it is haunted or not. And as our small group went in, we had about 4 to 5 hours in the property, if I remember right. We did have a docent with us at all times. She stayed basically in that middle hub spot because, like we said, unless you're going out to go around to solitary confinement, or you're going out onto the grounds towards the baseball diamond or the guard towers, they can see everything from that hub. Unfortunately, I want to say the most troubling thing we found the whole time we were there was anytime you'd shine your flashlight down towards the ground, the cockroaches would just scatter. The place was absolutely overrun and infested with cockroaches during the night hours. It was hard to avoid them. But in the meantime, you would find areas, find a little high ground and hang out for a minute, trying to investigate. Unfortunately, even at night, we didn't have much happen. Yeah, a couple times we did notice things that would move in one of the different cell blocks while we were standing, because we'd make a point to station ourselves also in that hub, in that center point, and try to catch as much as we could down the different cell blocks, trying to notice things, see things. And as we sat there, we would notice things moving. We would catch something moving out of the corner of our eye. But when we'd go down and check it out, there would be nothing there. Unfortunately, other than those instances that we can't really debunk, but we can't really say are actual evidence of a haunting, we didn't have a lot go on. We did have a section up in the women's ward, or what was considered one of the women's cell blocks, where we caught a couple EVPs that definitely sounded like female voices, but nothing concrete, nothing solid enough to say that they're speaking anything, that it wasn't some type of an interference somehow. We couldn't explain it, but we couldn't debunk it. I'm not disappointed at the fact that I got to investigate Eastern State, even though I didn't have a lot of activity go on with it. There is a long history of problems, issues, and there's always those ghost stories and there's rumors of hauntings. Who could it be? Capone himself talking about all the different times that he would hear voices or see things out of the corner of his eye while he was staying at Eastern State. And we just didn't experience it, but this type of stuff doesn't necessarily happen all the time. We spent a small sliver of time in this location. Can we say it's haunted? No. But we can definitely say that it was unexplained. Capone is often cited as complaining and explaining about the voices he heard while staying at Eastern State. The prison haunted him for years, long after he left, lingering with him. Another location that has been spoken about has lingered with many. So terrifying it has been used also in movies and television. We head to a small town in West Virginia known as Moundsville. There we encounter a building known as West Virginia State Penitentiary.